everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the First Gen Gamers. I am co-host number one, Jed Shaffer, and sitting not necessarily with me in the room, but with me in the universe is my co-host, Michael Peterson.
That's right. Former co-host of Player 2 has entered the podcast. Jed, you were former of Gamer Parent Strategy Guide, right?
Yes, one of the three former podcasts.
Oh my goodness, that's right. You did do multiple podcasts. We're joining forces to highlight the fact that, we're not necessarily first gen gamers, but we're first gen as far as the fact that we've been playing games as far back as they've been, they've not really been that popular to when they got really popular. Right.
Yep.
The 80s. So to me, that's far back enough. We're the godfathers of gaming. We want to give you our thoughts, opinions. We want to rank them, and we got tons of fun topics to come up with to tell you guys our opinions. And given that it's October, it's the spooky season, we decided that the first episode should probably be about horror games.
Yeah, and horror games and horror in and of itself, I know, is a big thing for me. I'm a huge horror movie fan, so scary stuff is right up my alley, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. And just to give you, the listener, a little bit of insight into how we're going to do this. Unlike other podcasts, unlike articles that you've read, unlike the YouTubers that you've watched, and this is no disrespect to any of that, but I know that everyone has read listicles, everyone has seen list-based videos. Those are great. Everyone loves counting down from 10 to 1. But that also tends to have recency bias. That also tends to ignore the fact that gaming, here in the year of our Lord 2023, video games are almost a 50-year, if we go back to the Odyssey, it's almost a 50-year hobby.
Yep.
And a lot of modern gaming YouTube channels and writers and such, they kind of forget the Atari generation and the NES generation and those older generations. So what we're going to do, Mike and I, we have a topic. Today is horror games. We both came up with separate lists. Each generation is going to get an example or multiple examples, in this case for this episode. But each generation we're going to give each generation a highlight. And we're going to compare them. And you guys, you listeners, you'll be able to write to us. You'll be able to post on social media to us if you want, and vote and say, I like Mike's idea better for Generation 4. I like Jed's idea for Generation 7. It'll be a fun debate going over the history of gaming through various topics of lenses.
Yeah, and I think the exciting thing about it, and the reason why I gravitate to this type of content, is sometimes you learn about hidden gems or games you may not necessarily have given a second look, but when you hear how they affect another person, that might be enough to get you into them, and you might find something that you really love that you never would have otherwise. So that's part of what I'm hoping to put into the show, but also get out of it. Learn from you, you learn from me, and we learn from the listeners. They'll probably have opinions, maybe even suggestions about lists that we should do, moving forward. And I'm open to it all for sure.
Yeah. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the topic. Like you said, first topic today is best horror games, and we are going to actually skip the second generation. That would be the generation with the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, the ColecoVision. We're going to skip that because unless you really want to count Haunted House, which
or
I
Texas
don't.
Chainsaw Massacre, I believe that came out on the Atari, didn't it?
Yeah.
Those graphics were scary, let me tell you.
It looked like Grimace playing freeze tag with a shillelagh.
Yeah, you really had to put your imagination to work. Not no disparaging earlier games because obviously they are the building blocks that we built upon to get to where we're at. But yeah, some of it's aged better than others. And in regards to horror, you really do need something visceral. You need something to kind of grip you. You know what I mean? To take a hold
Hmm.
of your imagination rather than you having to get your imagination and use it to get there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I agree with you. Starting with the third generation just makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That is for horror games. There is just so much more graphical fidelity, so much more ability to tell a story than there was on the 2600 and the ColecoVision. So, with that, we start with the third generation. There were three primary consoles in that generation: the NES, the Sega Master System, and the Atari 7800.
Hmm.
I couldn't find anything for the Atari 7800. I am not really familiar with the Atari 7800 library. Um, I looked it up, and it just the library is very, very small.
Yeah.
It's a lot of recycled content from the 26 and the 52,
Yes.
just upresed, given the spit and polish. So I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, no, me
So,
neither. I focused mainly on Nintendo and the Master System. What did you come up with, though?
so I'll do the Master System first because that one I will say is kind of the more throwaway one. That would be the game version of Alien 3. So movie license game.
Okay.
Uh, Alien 3 is not exactly the best game. It did get kind of torn apart on AVGN quite a while back, but
As many games tend to.
yeah, that is true. And movie license games of the era were not exactly friendly to being made very well. That being said, if you compare the versions of Alien 3 from the NES to the Sega Master System, at least visually, the Sega Master System just wipes the floor with the NES. Uh,
Mm,
the the xenomorphs actually look like xenomorphs. They're creepy. They're crawly. The world just has better detail. The character sprites have better detail. It's still kind of a cross between. It's kind of a run and gun, but also kind of a where the hell do I go kind of
mm.
platforming maze kind of game. Not
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 the
so much
only one of its ilk we're going to talk about on the list, so don't worry about that.
right. Not the best game, but for the Sega Master System, it just did not have a robust horror library. Not at least that I thought.
Yeah, I mean, if you go dig and you can find a few things, my personal pick was something that was a response to a very popular horror series, Castlevania. So Castlevania had exclusivity with NES, right? So the Sega Master System came along and Sega was like, well, what if we try to capitalize on that? And they made a game called Master of Darkness. Have you heard about this game?
I Something's tickling the back of my head of it. I
Jack
may
the
have seen.
Ripper, perhaps?
Oh,
London?
really?
Yeah, so you play as a man who is investigating murders in London around the time of Jack the Ripper, and is suspected to be the Jack the Ripper. Spoiler alert: it's actually Dracula. But you do get to fight Jack the Ripper, and you get to fight a lot of beasties, and you get to find health in walls. I mean, it's basically Castlevania, but if you didn't have the NES, this was your option. I'm not going to sit here and say it's better than Castlevania, but I think it's on par for the time. I'll give it that. I think graphically it looks better than Castlevania. I probably enjoy playing Castlevania more, but I think that's just more nostalgia. You know what I mean? Because I didn't get to play
Hmm.
Master of Darkness until after its hey. But it has great monster design. There are some creepy moments, and the fact that it alludes to real life occurrences, I think, kind of lends it some gravitas.
All right. I Color me intrigued. Just the fact that they're linking it to Jack the Ripper and
Hmm.
setting it in that old Victorian London era.
Yep.
That's intriguing. Uh,
Awesome.
uh, so for the NES,
Yes,
okay, now the NES actually has a decent amount of horror games.
it does.
Um, yeah, um, I bypassed a lot of the. obvious selections.
Okay.
Even though I'm a Castlevania fan, I love the Castlevania series.
Hmm.
Uh, I bypassed that. Um, I don't know whether to call it 3x3 eyes or 3x3 eyes or 3x3 eyes, whatever. That's got some horror aspects to it. Skipped that.
Hmm.
I went with something a little. It's a game that's gotten a little cult following, but I don't think a big enough cult following.
Mm.
Shadowgate.
Shadowgate. Okay.
If you haven't played it, it is essentially like a point and click adventure, but it is incredibly gothic. It takes place in a medieval castle. Everything's from the first person perspective, and it is all trial and error. Once you know the correct path, there's only the one correct path. Once you know it, it does kind of limit replay value. But for that, until you know the correct path and can beat it, it the visuals are a lot stronger than you would expect. There's a lot of creepy crawly stuff. There's I wouldn't necessarily say gore, but there is implied violence that is a little bit more than you would think for the NES. And it's just got this kind of classic Universal Monster, Hammer horror era kind of haunted castle feel to it.
Kind of like Castlevania, but first person and point and click.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I try not to go for the obvious ones either, but I do feel like this is kind of faux known on the NES. My pick was a horror RPG by Capcom called Sweet Home. I'm sure you've heard of that.
I have heard of it. I have not had the chance to play it.
The visuals are very creepy to me. It was the first instance I can recall of seeing like graphic violence, blood. I mean, it is kind of the spiritual grandfather of Resident Evil, but the fact that it's a horror RPG, and I mean, I don't remember seeing any of those until around the sixth generation personally. Maybe the fifth, but I wasn't that into them RPGs at the time. But I don't know. There's something about going through this house and then like the very fabric of reality changing, and like people kind of, I think it's trying to mirror people going insane and fighting these monsters, RPG style. I don't it They did a whole lot with a whole they did a whole lot within the limitations of the NES, and I'm very impressed with what they were able to pull off because it is very creepy.
That is one I will have to check out. Add it to the ever growing, never shrinking backlog list.
Right. I feel like we're going to end up organically having a new section on the podcast as we proceed through the episodes where we talk about the games we checked out from the previous episodes list.
Right.
Because I'm jotting a few things down myself. You know what I mean? For
Mm-hmm.
sure.
All right. So with that, we move on to the next generation. That is the fourth generation, the 16-bit era.
Mm-hmm.
We got the Super Nintendo, we got the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive for our non-American fans, and the TurboGrafx 16 or the PC Engine for our Japanese fans. I did find examples for all three. Kind of lazy on two of them, but it was really just sometimes the easiest answer is the best answer.
I kind of feel like I can already guess. Can I venture a guess?
Sure.
I venture a guess that with the TurboGrafx 16 and the Genesis, you went Splatterhouse.
Yes, and yes.
Same.
Yeah.
How could you pick anything else? Honestly.
Right. I mean, to be fair, for the TG16, it doesn't have a large library, and its horror library is even smaller than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But still, it's Splatterhouse. It is.
Right.
It's a legendary side-scrolling beat 'em up. It stars a guy who's built like an NFL linebacker and wearing a mask like Jason Voorhees, killing eldritch horrors and gory monsters, and it's blood splattering everywhere. I mean,
Oh yeah. And it's intense. I remember not being able to get very far in Splatterhouse 3 because of that time mechanic. So you have a map, you have to get through the mansion as fast as you can, and you can very easily just immediately get the bad ending by not getting to the end of the level very fast and saving your girlfriend because she's getting attacked by a monster.
Hmm.
And you know that timer is like ticking down and the game just keeps going, but you're already kind of fated to lose, you know what I mean? So it had replay value in the fact that you can learn the most efficient way to move through the level, how to deal with the different beasties. Some of them are very cheap, so really memorizing their patterns and understanding which attacks they're likely to do depending on your distance to them really was clutch if you wanted to get that good ending. I never could do it on my own, to be honest. I watched a speed run of it, and it was like watching a magic trick. It was amazing.
Hmm. Absolutely. I've Splatterhouse is one of those game series where I love playing despite the fact that I suck at it. Like,
Yeah,
I can get a couple levels in and then it's just battering me down, but
because it's
I
a
don't care.
vibe. It's a
Yeah,
vibe. It's
it
so
is.
cool. Yeah, especially for the time. Like you said, there wasn't a whole lot to go to really creep you out, especially to get nasty. I mean, Mortal Kombat is the game that started the ESRB. But before that, you kind of had to dig for the outrage. You had to dig to find something that would gross you out. You know what I mean? But it was there.
Yep.
I had one more for the Genesis I wanted to mention, and this is kind of cheating. Okay, so there is a company back in 2019 that set out to make a new Sega Genesis game. And there was a game made called Demons of Asterborg. Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it. God, I want to say that I have it. Didn't it come out on the Switch as well?
It did. So it did come to
Yeah.
Steam and the Switch, but also literally they made Sega Genesis cartridges. So it counts. It counts.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Smooth animations, a ghouls and ghosts vibe, but I feel like a little bit, less cheap. And, just as creepy and fun as like any other like old SNES style Castlevania adventure game that you would play. So
I
definitely
have
recommend for folks.
I have it on my Switch wish list. That's a hard thing to get out.
Yeah,
Yeah, just haven't had the chance, to add it to the ever growing backlog of games I haven't played.
I feel you on that. For those listening, though, if you're into that type of game, you like a 2D side scrolling, demon hunting game, you could do a lot worse than Demons of Asterborg for sure. And I know that's hard to spell, so it's Asteborg. I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation, but look it up for sure.
Yeah,
Did you have anything for the SNES?
I do. It might be a controversial pick because it depends on how far you want to stretch the concept of horror.
You picked Super Metroid, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Wow, I'm inside your brain today, dude.
Apparently,
We did not
I
share these lists, folks.
no, that is part of the gimmick of this podcast is we absolutely the only thing we share is topics. We do not want to tell each other the lists ahead of time.
Yeah, this is
Um,
fun. I like this. So Super Metroid, huh? I get where you're
yeah,
going, but go ahead,
yeah.
explain.
I, Horror and sci-fi have an indelible link. Not every sci-fi movie is horror, not every horror movie is sci-fi, but when they work together, it's perfect fusion.
Instant
Movie
classics, man.
Right, Alien,
Hmm.
Predator,
Hmm.
Event Horizon.
Yes.
You want to bring something, more cerebral surrealism stuff like Phantasm or the recent movie Color Out of Space. Um, all of these things have sci-fi elements, but they use the sci-fi basis to bring horror by way of otherworldly and unimaginable things. Uh, the horror of being isolated, the horror of being alone in an
Hmm.
unfamiliar place, being unprepared, not knowing what's around the corner. Super Metroid captures all of that. The world is desolate, it is claustrophobic, it's creepy, and there is precisely zero life forms that are ready to help you.
Yeah.
Every life form on that planet wants you dead.
The only life form that does help you is extinct. The
Right.
Chozo.
Yeah. So, yeah, it might not seem like a horror game when you stack it up against the Resident Evils and the Fatal Frames and the games of that ilk, but when you think of the claustrophobia and the just the omnipresent threat of death of it, far as I'm concerned, it's a horror game.
I don't think it's that big of a stretch. I completely agree with you. And there are areas that are creepier than others. It is definitely a vibe. And if Die Hard can be a Christmas movie, then damn it, Super Metroid can be a horror game, is what I say.
I'm fine with that. I'll take that argument.
There you go. So you mentioned point and click horror in the previous generation. That's kind of where I leaned on the SNES. Clock Tower was on the SNES, if you recall. And I feel like if that was your only option to play it, it wasn't the worst option ever. And it was legit scary because it was the first game I recall where you had like an ever present stalker enemy. I mean, that's kind of bread and butter for a lot of games nowadays, but it was a very fresh concept back in the day
Hmm.
where the guy with the giant scissors could pop in at any moment and murder the person you're talking to and come after you or bust through the wall. And sometimes you would just be in a position where if you didn't make the right snap decision, you sealed your fate. And that was freaky. And he wasn't very polite with those scissors, let me tell you. It was gory, it was frightening, it was tense. And as far as point and click, sometimes it can be a little obtuse and frustrating. It was middle of the road. Like I enjoyed it enough. And again, the atmosphere I think is what carries you through. So
So I remember, wasn't it on the PlayStation 1
they did
as
do a
well?
they did a
Yeah.
remake or not like a re-release or not a remaster, but like yeah, there was a different version on the PlayStation 1. You're right.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one I'm familiar with. I did not know that it was on Super Nintendo.
Yep,
So
on the SNES.
that's intriguing. Another thing to check out.
There you go. There you go. All right, we're moving on to the more interesting generation, I think, for horror, as far as like the first one, where it kind of really opens up, in my opinion, the fifth generation, right?
I
You
would
got
agree.
your PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, 3DO, Jaguar, all that. So, I mean, what picks did you come up with in that generation? I'd be very interested to hear that.
So the only system that I really didn't pick anything for was the 3DO. I've never touched a 3DO. I could sit here and read something from a list and go, yeah, that's the best horror game. I just don't have the experience for it. I don't want to
I got
BS
you
my
covered
way.
on that
Yeah.
one. I didn't do one for
Okay.
Jaguar, so we'll
Oh, well, I got one for Jaguar, so
there we go.
we'll cover
Cover
all
the
the
bases.
bases.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the Jaguar, the obvious one, the one of the only two games that you could reasonably call a killer app on that system, Alien versus Predator.
Yes.
It is a first person shooter, depending on which character you pick. You can either be a colonial marine, you could be the Predator, or you could be a xenomorph. I mean, to me, that just sells itself right there. You get to be any one of. I mean, the Colonial Marine is the least interesting of the three, as far as I'm concerned. You got the Xenomorph with the high speed, the crawling ability, the acid blood, which does pool up in the ground, and if you step in it, and you're not a Xenomorph, it will burn you.
Hmm.
You got the little the tongue,
Yeah, the thing that kind of
the
punctures out. Yeah.
yeah,
Tongue
the
mouth.
tongue mouth. Yeah. Um, okay, we are way too in sync for the first episode.
Yeah.
um, and then with the Predator, you've got his that disc frisbee thing. You've got the plasma cannon. You've got the cloaking device, and it's all, like I said, it's a first person shooter. It's rudimentary. Its frame rate looks closer to a flip book than 60 FPS smoothness that we're used to, but it's like Super Metroid, like Alien 3 before it. It just captures the vibe of those movies.
I'm sensing a thing with what frightens you, Jed. I'm sensing that that cosmic horror, that space isolation, that's really getting to you.
Yeah, this one, I will tell you, this won't be the last time that it pops up.
Fair enough. I'm adjacent to that. I really dig like Lovecraftian horror, which obviously like Color Out of Space. I've seen that too, and I really dug it. It was gnarly. Oh my god,
Yes, it
that
was.
could be a whole nother topic unto itself. So yeah, and my pick for the 3DO is similar because I chose a game in the Warhammer universe called Space Hulk. A lot of people say Event Horizon is basically a Warhammer movie
Hmm.
because of the fact the ship can warp around in different dimensions, including hell. There's some adjacent themes definitely in Warhammer. With Space Hulk, it's first person shooter on its face. Like it looks like a first person shooter. Monsters are coming at you, but it's so notoriously difficult, and to really survive, you have to use a lot more strategy and forethought than you think you would in this type of game. It looks like a Doom, but do not play it like Doom. You'll die immediately. It's not for everybody, but because you're so underpowered compared to the foes that you're facing, it is scary as hell. And the monsters in that game, I mean, they're fierce looking and they give you no quarter. So if you like trolling around dark corridors, spaceships, and fighting aliens, which it sounds like you do, might be good to look into Space Hulk for sure.
Now I just have to find a way to play a 3DO.
Right? Can find a way to get that emulated.
Right? Maybe need to get a new Raspberry Pi. Oh wait, no. I will theoretically get a Raspberry Pi. Please don't sue me.
No, you can get a Raspberry Pi and then take your
Yeah.
legit owned copy of Space Hulk and rip the ISOs and pop it on there, of course.
I'm sure it's very cheap to find, 3DO games on the aftermarket too.
Sure.
Yeah. Only a couple $100 a piece, probably.
There you go. All right, so we have three other systems. What's speaking to you?
Well, I am going to cheat a little bit and combine two of them, the Saturn and the N64, because they had really small libraries,
Yeah,
and their horror libraries were even smaller. Thus, especially Nintendo, it that just was not the generation for them going M rated.
N64
So
had like 294 games, I think, all total. It was
yeah,
low.
it was not the most robust library.
Yeah.
Um, so really the easy standout. It again, it's one of those. It's the easy answer, but sometimes the easy answer is the best. For both of them, it's games in the Resident Evil franchise. For the Saturn, it's the first one. For N64, it's the second one.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
do I really have to speak on the first two Resident Evil games? Like they're
I
tentpole.
don't think so. I don't
Yeah,
think so. I think at this point, anybody listening to this podcast, it's ubiquity. It needs no
yeah,
introduction. I'll give you deep cuts for Saturn and N64. I mean, not the deepest cuts ever, but I mean, anything. I feel like anything on the Saturn is a deep cut, to be honest. But for the
true.
Saturn, I chose a game called Deep Fear, which was a Resident Evil clone. So we're still in the same theme. You have to explore an underwater research facility. You do the tank controls. It's survival horror. You got to solve puzzles. The thing that I think helps it stand out, not necessarily to make it better than Resident Evil, but kind of stand shoulder to shoulder. Graphically, it is really nice compared to its contemporaries. And the monster design is just mwah. Like they're pretty creepy. It's not just zombies and then like roided out animals that you get in Resident Evil. I know that's reductive, and we can give the monsters in Resident Evil more credit, but they really kind of expanded kind of the monstrosities ideas, how things can morph and kind of dead spacey, but again less one note, if that makes sense. So
Right.
good stuff. And then for N64, it's a game that has been recently remastered, so if you're interested you can play it now.
That got remastered.
Shadow Man got remastered. You can probably play it on, I'm pretty sure you can play it on Switch, PS4, Xbone, probably PC. They may even have modern versions like PS5 and Series X, I'm not sure. But Shadow Man is such a unique idea, I feel like, and I don't want to say too much about it except for just to kind of give you the type of game it is in case you're interested. But I mean, you've heard of Shadow Man, obviously.
Hmm.
It's an adventure game. It reminds me, not that it's anything like it in terms of themes, but more gameplay wise, it reminds me of like the Legacy of Kain or the Soul Reaver type games you play on PS1 and PS2. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, you have no idea the itch you just scratched.
Right?
Oh, I love the Legacy of Kain games so much. So,
Yeah, no, they're great.
that
They're great.
yeah.
And I feel like it's that same type of vibe as far as, adventuring around, platforming, fighting enemies. And, the protagonist is really well designed. He glows in the dark, kind of looks like Venom a little bit. I just think it's a neat concept all around. And the fact that I got a remaster is really cool. So hunt that one down if you're, missing the good old days when you can just adventure around an environment like that, in a game like that. You could do a lot worse than Shadow Man for sure.
I'm jazzed. I definitely got to find that.
Cool. I'll be interested to hear what you think about it.
All right. So, last console in this generation, the mighty PlayStation 1.
Yeah, certainly not least. My goodness. I love the
No,
PlayStation 1.
no. Oh, even though a lot of the games on it have not aged the best, some of them are just still so much fun. I mean, that was, I don't know about you. That console came out uh the year I turned 18. So that was just like that angry young man. It was edgy, it was cool. This ain't your kid's console anymore. Oh, that just
Yeah.
a lot of nostalgia tied to that console.
Lot of edgelord options for the PS1 for sure.
Yes. And I will admit that my pick for the horror game probably is Super Edgelord here, and it's not the best game, but I have such a nostalgia for it.
Mhm.
Tecmo's Deception.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. Like that's definitely it's an acquired taste.
Yes. So, for those uninitiated, Tecmo's Deception is a first-person game where you to give the TLDR version of the story, medieval times, you are the son of the king, you're the first in line for the throne, your brother is a power-hungry jerk, he frames you for your father's murder, you get, if I remember correctly, hunted down by the town and murdered.
Mhm.
But right before you die, you make a pact with Satan to get revenge. And so you now possess a massive castle and you set traps for the unwilling and uneducated adventurers and otherwise innocent people who go wandering into your castle to sacrifice them to Satan in order to build up your power so you can get revenge on your father murdering brother.
As you do. Yeah.
As you do.
As you
Yes.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my Tuesday. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no,
Um
little
you,
little patricide. Come on now.
yeah. The gameplay I will not pretend is terribly smooth.
Yeah, I couldn't get into it. Like I love the concept like you, and I tried a couple of times to play it, and it's been done better since. So I'm glad that it exists because I feel like it was iterated upon and inspired other games. But yeah, I mean, did you ever beat it?
Yes, I did.
Oh, congratulations on
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, the gameplay is odd because you are not an active participant in what you're doing. You set a trap and then you lure them in and you wait for them to get to the trap and then you spring it. And then you collect their soul and you go to a special room and you send it down to hell or whatever.
Mhm.
So the gameplay loop is awkward. I will freely admit that, but there is just something so interesting about playing as Satan's vessel.
Mhm.
It's it's edgelordy. It is, but it's for some reason it just tickles that 18-year-old in me that is like, screw the system, screw your,
Yeah.
just wants to give the world a middle finger.
Yeah. And what would piss people off more back when you were 18 than hanging with the devil?
Yep.
That's what all the music was about. I My pick is a little less interesting, but I had some honorable mentions to kind of offset it. So, I mean, PS1, Silent Hill. I just did Silent Hill. Come on. I mean, Silent Hill. Do I
Yeah.
have to say more? Really?
No,
No,
not
not at
really.
all. And it only gets better from there. My personal favorite game in the series is 3, but 1 obviously kind of kicks off that story, and it is such an interesting and often misunderstood story, but I think that's what's so cool about it is that it's not presented to you up front. You really do have to pay attention and piece it together. that paired with the camera angles, the sound design, the music, I mean, it really was, there was nothing else quite like it at the time. You know, if Resident Evil is a hamburger, a tasty one at that, don't get me wrong, Silent Hill is a steak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I might be pissing some people off saying that, but I don't care. Now, aside from that, on the PS1, there were so many options. I couldn't really just leave it at that. There is a deep cut that I think a lot of people should check out if they haven't played. It's called Galarians. Have you heard of that?
No.
Galarians is a Resident Evil clone again, and you wake up and you have like psychic powers. You're like in this area, you're trying to survive, and you can see like what's past doors, and you can use that to your advantage. But you basically still have to like find supplies, solve puzzles, survive monsters. It's just a kind of a twist on that genre. And then, of course, in the art again, I'm leaning towards horror RPGs. It seems like in this list, but Parasite Eve is the other one that I
Yeah.
would highly recommend. Body horror, interesting monster design, a weird RPG system that just works but sounds like it wouldn't on paper, and it's short, which may be attractive to some of our older listeners because I'm tired of playing. I'm playing through Final Fantasy 16 right now, and the game refuses to end. I've been trying
Yeah.
so hard. But I think you could probably, if you really wanted to, finish Parasite Eve in a lazy weekend. I think it's like 11 or 12 hours long. And it's just there's no fat on those bones. It's all meat. It's good. It's good stuff. You know what I mean? Like from start to finish. So
So sometimes you need that kind of game that just knows, it knows when to start, knows when to stop, doesn't want to put, 600 icons on the map just to have an overfilled map.
exactly.
Hi Ubisoft.
Yeah. And even that can be done, better or worse depending on the person that likes that type of game. But yes, if you're looking for something that you just can go through and just play it and experience it and not have to worry about it trying to get you to stay and play, Parasite Eve is a good option. And I think that fits the horror genre. Who wants to just be constantly scared for dozens and dozens of hours? No, thank you. I need to rest first.
Right, right. So, well, sooner or later, it's the law of diminishing returns. Like,
Yes.
if it goes too long, you're just being bludgeoned at that point with shock tactics, and you get numb to it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that speaks to the nuance of horror, diminishing returns, because horror is about the unknown. It's about mystery. It's about the things that you don't see or don't quite understand. And like you said, the longer you're in an area, the longer you have to think about it, the less mysterious and scary it becomes. So, 100% agree.
Yep.
Speaking of mysteries, Sixth Generation also very robust in regards to horror.
Yes,
I'm interested. What we got? What are we looking at first, console wise?
we are looking at the PlayStation 2, the original Xbox, the very short-lived Dreamcast,
Ill fated.
and ill-fated. Rest in peace, Sega.
Yeah,
I know they're still around, but as far as I'm concerned, the Sega that I grew up with, the Sega that I love,
yeah.
died. They pretty much died with the Dreamcast, and what is around now is just, it's not the same.
It's not the same. I'm not. You know what? As an aside, I know we're probably going to do a lot of tangents on the show. It's such a weird feeling because I love Sega and I love the Dreamcast, but it's like something that you like getting destroyed by something you like even more. Like the
Right?
PS2 is so awesome. And they just ruthlessly, two generations in a row, if you think about it. The PS1 with the Saturn, then the PS2,
Hmm.
the 1-2 punch, Sony destroyed Sega. And they kind of earned it. Like I can't.
Yeah. I mean, Sega basically bared its throat and said, "Here, do your worst." And Sony went, "Well, since you gave me the opportunity."
Yeah, no, they were like, we've been training this for this our whole lives. No remorse. All right. Well,
Uh,
let's start with the
oh,
ill-fated
yeah.
Dreamcast. I'm interested. Well, oh, I forgot. You didn't mention the fourth console, did you? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. Well, it's the GameCube. I'm not going to sit here and slander the GameCube, but it is kind of, it's Nintendo's second least selling console. So,
Yeah, I mean, but again, like the Dreamcast, I feel like it got a bad rap, and it's not actually. I don't know. I think it stands with that generation a lot better than people really recall. There's a lot of games and a lot of series and a lot of things that started with the GameCube. And yeah, it's been ported just like the Wii U to death. So that way you can access a lot of the GameCube's greatness. But in the system itself, had it been managed a little better, I think would have been a Titan for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and say it's a bad console. I think it was the wrong console.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah. At the time, it was just the wrong avenue for Nintendo to go through. I'm sure we'll talk about something like this. It'll come up at some point in another topic.
Yeah, maybe,
Um,
maybe. All right.
so, um, so unfortunately, I my experience with the Dreamcast was very limited. I, as much of a Sega fanboy as I was for the Genesis and the Saturn, because
Mm.
I held on to the Saturn until '98.
Oh
I
wow.
yeah, I fought tooth and claw for that machine. I never got on board the Dreamcast. I've touched it a little bit. I've played a couple of games, but I never touched a horror game on there.
Okay.
So I don't have something to add for this one.
Okay, I'll give you one. My best friend at the time did get a Dreamcast, and he was so dejected by it being destroyed. That was the last console he ever bought. He moved to PC and never looked back.
I can understand the heartbreak.
But at the time, when it first came out, it was amazing. There were a lot of games on there really pushing the envelope. Again, like you said, probably going to come up in lists later on. But as far as survival horror and regular horror games, it had a mix. It had its Resident Evils and other popular, IPs. There was a survival horror game that I really enjoyed playing that was a little different, called Blue Stinger. And essentially, you're like near an island that gets struck by a meteor and causes you to be trapped, and you can't leave the island. And all of these monsters, it's called Dinosaur Island, but it's not dinosaur themed. I don't know how to explain that part, but you're fighting monsters supposedly either created or disturbed by the meteor and trying to escape with your life. And it has a weird mix of combat where you're shooting monsters, but also to save bullets, you're finishing them off with a baseball bat. And it reminds me a little bit of River City Ransom, because and this part is goofy enough to kind of take you out of the horror, but as you're beating the monsters to death, coins are flying out of their ass. So you can literally beat the loose change out of these bastards. And there's just something about like goofiness in games like that doesn't come around very often anymore. And I miss when, the quirkiness that would come along with a lot of games. They were chronically unserious. They knew what they were. It was just about having fun. Blue Stinger, I feel like, embodies that in regards to a horror game, and people should check it out for sure.
All right. So up next, I did another combination because honestly, this for as much as I loved the PlayStation 2, because that was my console, this
Mm.
was a period of my life where gaming kind of got pushed back for
Mm.
other things. I got married during this console generation, had my first kids during this console generation. So this is the generation where while I was gaming, my depth of gaming wasn't terribly deep. So I did do a combination for both the PS2 and the Xbox. I'm sure that you'll have separate suggestions so you can fill in better blanks, but my nomination for both would be Silent Hill 2.
Yeah.
Um, Again, like you said in the previous generation, does Silent Hill need an introduction? Especially Silent Hill 2 with its creepy almost Lovecraftian feeling to it. The way that they use the fog, even though it was done for a technical limitation, it actually helps the setting of it. The multiple endings, which just get crazier and crazier.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's Silent Hill 2. Why do I need to go on with it?
Yeah, Silent Hill. The thing I really like about Silent Hill 2 is the acting and the writing. It's so almost human, you know? Like people make fun of it, but it was very intentional what they did. People
Hmm.
sound off. They act off. It's almost like you're going mad alongside James, just trying to get through this town to figure out how your dead wife contacted you, right? And
Yep.
then when you finally get to that conclusion, I'm not going to ruin it for the folks because I still think even after all this time, you should experience it for yourself. And there's a remake coming up, which normally I wouldn't be on board with because of the way Konami has handled Silent Hill since Team Silent broke up back on 4. But the fact that they got Masahiro Ito to be on board with, from the original Team Silent to work with this game has me like, I'm side eyeing it, right? The twists, the turns, the stuff that you find out within the game, it's one of those games that's going to stick to your ribs. It's one of those stories that's going to stay with you. And I think that there's a very good reason why so many people name it as their favorite horror game of all time or their favorite Silent Hill game of all time, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep. Now, for me, I do have separate, but I'll go ahead and stay on theme. PS2, I chose Silent Hill 3. I thought that was scarier than Silent Hill 2, in my personal opinion, but everybody has obviously different things that are going to scare them. And I
Right.
really like the cult storyline from 1, 3, and 4, where they're trying to like resurrect this demon god. And that's kind of what's affecting the town through like the psychic nightmare manifestations of Alyssa, that, that type of thing. And you're playing as like the grown-up doppelganger of her and trying to like figure out what's going on with you and why the cult is targeting you. And it's just, again, there's not a whole lot we need to explain with Silent Hill. The main strength of Silent Hill, I think, is the art design and the sound design, and that really can make or break a horror game. But the story and the gameplay, hold up just as well. So Xbox, I'm not mad at you for combining because I feel like Xbox didn't really get its own identity until the 360. It was the first of its run, right? The original Xbox. It's when Microsoft entered the console game and they were trying to find their footing. And I think they found their footing more with tech and um, functionality within the system itself more than games. I mean, we can argue Halo obviously was seminal, but for me, Xbox in that generation was more about just getting more people interested in local gaming, and like getting the online thing going. You know what I mean? That's kind of
Hmm.
what the Xbox was to me. And there were a couple of really interesting RPGs that were stuck on the system, but other than that, and other than Halo, there wasn't a whole lot differentiating it from the other consoles, in my opinion. That said, if you want to play a scary game on Xbox, you go with Silent Hill or you go Fatal Frame. I think Fatal Frame, for those uninitiated, is a Japanese horror game where you usually investigate a haunted area, and in order to defend yourself from ghosts, you have to take pictures of them, which sucks. It forces you to look at the thing that you're scared of, right? And there's a lot of jump scares, a lot of ghosts going boo when you go from room to room, and a lot of creepy stuff that happens, and a lot of tricks with the camera. So you're already heightened and really tense. And the fact that you know that a ghost is coming to kill you and you have to like get it in frame in order to defend yourself from it, I thought was a really cool mechanic.
All right. That brings us to the little purple lunchbox.
Yeah.
I got a feeling that we might have another in sync moment,
You think so?
unless you decided to go deep cut.
Okay. I
But
didn't go super deep cut, but we'll see.
my pick for it would be Eternal
Eternal
Darkness,
Darkness.
Sanity's
There it
War.
is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. I know that Resident Evil 4 is the big swinging dick on the console for for horror games,
And deserves to be.
and deserves to be, but Eternal Darkness is just so much more clever of a concept,
Yes.
so much more interesting of a game. Resident Evil 4 is a fun game. You can't not have fun with it. But if you want pure skin crawling horror, I mean, the game's got a sanity meter where you have to keep your character's sanity in check. Otherwise, they start to go off the rails and it affects actual gameplay.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, to the point where, okay, we're 20 years past. I think I'm not going to give it all away, but the game starts messing with you, the game player, in ways kind of reminiscent of
Metal Gear Solid.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it starts messing with you, thinking that your system's crashing.
Yeah.
Um, it is a mind twistingly, just skin crawlingly weird game, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
What I love about it, and again, just like Fatal Frame, it has some jump cuts and scares and like that. You know, it's not cheap, but it'll throw those in there to kind of keep you tense. But like you said, the insanity meter, and sometimes it just gets forced down, even if you manage it as best you can really be scary because it'll make you think you failed. You know, and like you said, it'll mess with your system in a meta way. But also, you're playing as different characters and getting used to the different settings because you're following a storyline that goes back eons, right?
mhm.
You're getting into some Cthulhu bullshit, some old ones territory. And so as you are in the as the main character investigating the recent death of your grandfather and the mansion that you inherited and looking into like his records, you're going back um so many thousands of years and playing as different characters that are all affected by the same entity. And I don't want to go further into it than that, but that alone, like, there's not a whole lot out there like it, and it's trapped on the GameCube, unlike Resident Evil 4, which you could play on a toaster if you wanted to.
Right. All right. So with that, seventh generation,
Okay.
that is the PS3, 360, and Wii era. Um, I did another cheat, and I only did this cheat because I have never played a 360.
Oh, fair.
I've held the controller like once, twice maybe, and at a GameStop. Um, but I know this game is cross-platform, and it's a truly chilling game. And this is what I hinted at earlier about galactic and cosmic horror coming back. Alien Isolation.
Mm.
First person uh perspective, but it's not a shooter. It's it is strictly a survival horror. Are a you are an officer on a ship that has been infected by xenomorphs. You are going there to investigate why the ship is derelict and missing just about all of its crew. And then you start to hear noises. Then you start to see things. And because it's in first person, which is a perspective I don't normally enjoy, but in this instance, it limits your focus, your ability to see. You can't get a full view of the playing field. You can only see what's directly in front of you. So you hear that scritchy, scratchy noise of something, and it's coming from behind you. You have to turn around and see what it is. You're not a colonial marine. You're not armed to the teeth with pulse rifles and grenade launchers and and armed to the teeth.
Yeah, you're
You
playing
are
Ripley's daughter, right?
uh I don't
I thought
I
canon
don't
wise you were playing
recall.
as Ripley's daughter.
You might be. It's been a while since I've played it.
I'll look it
I
up while
can't
you're
quite
talking
remember.
just to make sure because I don't remember either, but I thought that was the
Yeah.
case.
But yeah, she's not a colonial marine. She's
No.
not buff and strong. She's scavenging things to try and just get a flashlight working, let alone medical packs and supplies, anything to get through this broken ship because the ship has got malfunctions and breaks all over the place. So you have to navigate these tight corridors, air vents sometimes, the plumbing system. So it's a game that's just dripping with atmosphere. It is as close as you can get to being in an alien movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think when they nail the vibe like that, instant classic. It is Ripley's daughter, by the way. Amanda Ripley
Okay.
learns that the flight recorder of her mother's ship, the Nostromo, has been located. So that's what she's investigating in that game. It's
Okay.
it caught me by surprise when you said that for 360 because I forgot that this happens. Alien Isolation is technically, in my opinion, an eighth generation game. But because the previous generation consoles were still prevalent, it came out on those as well. But it simultaneously came out on PS4 and Xbone, if you recall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Now that you mention it, I do recall that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So That's an interesting pick. And when you said it, I was like, did it come out in 360? But it sure did. It sure did. All right. What else you got?
Um, the only other console for that generation is the Wii, because I'm not counting the Ouya. Um, well, I think that was that generation, but come on,
Yeah. Well,
we're
you're not
never.
the only one who didn't count the Ouya, unfortunately.
Yeah, the world didn't count the Ouya.
Yeah.
The Wii. If you were on around game playing during the Wii, you know why I'm going. Its library is just so chock full of let's not mince words. Shit.
Yeah. Bullshit for sure.
Yeah. The shovelware hellhole. It
Yeah.
had great games. It had some
It
very
had
great games.
amazing games,
Yeah.
but it's just
Yeah.
you had to wade through a sea of bullshit to get to it.
Yeah. And the number of horror games on there could probably be counted with one hand and chop a few fingers off first. So the one I picked, it's Dead Rising Chop Till You Drop.
Okay. Well,
It's
that
it
technically is an exclusive, right? Because it plays a little different than its 360 counterpart, correct?
it does. I mean, it's pretty much the 360 version, but incredibly stripped down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, the Wii just did not have the horsepower to have the football fields worth of zombies that the 360 did. So the mall in Chop Till You Drop is a lot more barren. There's far less zombies per square foot.
Hmm.
I don't know that the weapon crafting ability is as robust as the 360 version. I'm
Okay.
not doing a great job selling it here, it sounds
No,
like,
it sounds like
but
this game sucks.
it if all you had was a Wii, it is the best you're going to get. If you have access to the real version of Dead Rising, obviously play the
Yeah.
360 version, or I think they may have remastered it eventually and put it on PS3. But it's a decent if you've got a Wii and you only have a Wii for some reason at this stage of the game and you're looking for a horror game, it's fine. It's wandering through a mall, hacking at zombies. There's a timer. Um, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's the unfortunately it is the thinnest kid at fat camp.
Fair
It's
enough.
the yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you an Adonis because the Wii did have a few gems, and it sounds like that a few of them may have been overlooked by you because there are a decent amount of horror games on the Wii. Believe it or not.
All right.
It's
I'll
still on one hand, I'll give you that. But because Resident Evil 4 was ported, right? You have
true.
quirky titles like Bug Island. There's Obscure, there's Cursed Mountain. The thing that I really like that didn't do too well on Metacritic, and I'll explain why and why I still like it, on the Wii, Ju-on the Grudge. There is a Ju-on
Okay.
game on the Wii. It is basically a haunted house simulator. There are 3 levels where you play as 3 people who are affected by the curse. In the first level, you're walking with your dog, then your dog just tears ass off into like abandoned warehouse and you have to find them. And it actually will, albeit admittedly not super well, but the mechanic idea is cool. It'll judge how shaky you are with the Wiimote as you're moving through the area to see how scared you are. And you're constantly getting jump scared. So like the Ju-on girl and the little cat boy, like, they're like scaring you and stuff is falling and like you're getting haunted. And there's some quick time events to make sure you don't end the level right there, right? And you have to collect batteries because the areas you're in are very dark. And the way you move with because there's no nunchuck, it's just the Wiimote is a little wonky. But I like a good horror game that you can play with other people in the room and that not necessarily everybody has to play, but everybody can enjoy it. And I've had a lot of fun playing Ju-on with friends and family and just seeing if we can get through, the levels. I always have a tough time with the second level, which is in a hospital, because if you run out of batteries or don't know where to go, then it's game over, obviously. And if you get to the end, I mean, it's Ju-on, it's still game over. But it's fun. It's a fun journey to get there. So if you're into haunted house simulators or you just want to give it a game to your little sister and watch her jump, I would say Ju-on is the game to go for on the Wii.
All right.
Now, 360, I that was my console of that generation. I jumped ship from PS2 to 360. I think it had to do with price. The PS3's launch was a little sloppy.
Yeah, that's a generous way to put it.
360, a lot of my friends were already on board with the Xbox, so there was like a robust infrastructure if I wanted to play with other people. And Gears of War was just looking like amazing to me. So that was one of the games that kind of sold the system. Interestingly enough, ironically, Dead Rising also sold the system to me. The fact that
I
you
can see
could
why.
play a game with all those different zombies on screen, like that to me, the once we leave the sixth generation, the leap in graphics becomes more and more minute. And at the end of the sixth generation, the beginning of the seventh, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of difference, but I also didn't have an HD TV. I went to a friend's house who had an HD TV and he had a 360, he had Dead Rising, he had Saints Row. And then I was like, okay, I can see the graphical leap. I can see the potential of this console. You have sold me, right?
Hmm.
That said, you know, there there are a lot of games on 360 that I think a lot of people may have overlooked because they weren't going to the system for that genre of game. There are a lot of really great RPGs. There's some decent horror games. The series that I really like and one of the scariest games I've ever played on the 360 or in general is Dead Space. Dead Space started in that on that era on the PS3 and
Hmm.
360. And I first played it on 360. And again, sound design. I'll probably say sound design a million times because that to me is one of the strongest indicators of a good game in the horror genre. Coupled with, I mean, again, it's space horror. We love space horror apparently on this podcast.
Yeah,
uh,
who knew?
and subverting the idea that you need to go for the head when you're shooting monsters, but rather separating their limbs can actually chill them out. You know what I mean? And the fact that they had multiple limbs and different animations, they'd skitter around you different ways. I just thought the whole experience was super frightening. I feel like Dead Space 2 is probably the scariest of the three. So if you're looking to just to play one of them and try them out, I think that would be the one to go for. But Dead Space 1 holds up surprisingly well. And then I picked an obvious one for PS3. I wanted to pick an exclusive and something that I think a lot of people would resonate with. And I think the best horror game on the PS3 for that generation, say it with me now, The Last of Us.
Controversial statement.
You
I
think
think that
so?
game's. I think that game's terribly overrated.
Interesting. What is it about the game that you feel like gets too much credit?
I hate to say it, but what doesn't? I top to bottom. Okay, I will give you that the first 15 minutes of the story
Yeah.
with the when the zombie plague breaks out
Yeah.
and he finds out that he discovers that his daughter dies. Yeah, I'm a dad. That that hit me in my dad heart.
Yeah, for sure.
And then after that, for me, the whole game just fell off a cliff. I found the gameplay loop to be frustrating.
Mm,
I know that the whole idea of it is that you're scavenging for supplies, which make because it is a world gone to hell. Uh, but it just felt more frustrating than realistic to me. Um, I didn't connect with Joel I at all after that point after the daughter died. Um, Ellie just seemed like a trophy. I don't know, just something about the game to me, and I love Naughty Dog as a developer.
yeah.
I the Uncharted series, fantastic. Jack and Daxter, amazing set of platformers.
Yeah.
For some reason, for me, Last of Us just did not
Didn't jive.
did not jive with me at all.
I'm not going to judge you for it. I do disagree. I am with the majority. But I also thought it was slightly overrated. I think people will talk about it like it's the greatest game of all time, and I think it's a good experience. I did enjoy the gameplay. I did enjoy the story. I enjoyed Last of Us Part 2 way more. Last of Us Part 2, and that's not on my list, so I'll just go ahead and have an aside about it now. But The Last of Us Part 2, the story affected me so deeply and like really stuck to my ribs. Like my heart still hurts when I think about that game. And I've played through it multiple times and like trophy hunting, and there were times where I just had to skip the scene because I just didn't want to cry that day. You know what I mean? Like it is
Wow.
it is a fucking Greek tragedy. And what's amazing about the game is how they shift your empathy, your hate, and your hurt. If you're a normal person, there's a lot of backlash in that game about wokeness and playing as somebody who you're supposed to hate and being mad about it. I'm a grown up and I have more nuance than that. And I thought that the choice to have an antagonist that so thoroughly wrecks what you love from the first game, if you're a fan, or just, establish characters that you care about, and then you go and play as them and you get to see their perspective. I thought that was such a powerful narrative tool. And the entire game is such a masterful critique and exploration of the cycle of vengeance and revenge. You know what I mean? Like it
Hmm.
feels like a classic Greek. Like, I mean, it's like something that you would study in advanced lit. Like, they just did a
Right.
really good job. And gameplay wise, they took a cue from Uncharted, which you figured they would have done that with the original Last of Us. But more than ever, there's so many set piece moments in The Last of Us Part 2. There are moments where things kind of open up and you're exploring. There are other moments where it's very scripted, but it's very tense. And on Last of Us 1, you immediately knew where a shootout was going to happen because you just look across all this inorganic waist high cover, right? And you're like, we're shooting here, I guess. In
Yep.
Last of Us Part 2, the level design was so much better and felt so much more organic, and you couldn't immediately guess like some shit's going to go down here, even though like after a while you still can because video games, right? But they did a
Right.
really good job of subverting that and doing the best they could to make the world feel organic. And there are games in recent years that have really stuck to me and hit me emotionally. The God of War reboot,
Oh
the
yeah.
Final Fantasy VII reboot, and maybe that's because nostalgia and because my decades long attachment to those characters. But The Last of Us Part Two like definitely stands with those games as something that I'll never forget. It really was a powerful experience. So I'm giving The Last of Us the nod in the seventh generation, kind of as a nod to the series as a whole.
That's fair. And I admit I am on an island with it.
Yeah, and
I
that's
ha- I
okay.
have I have no problem being on an island.
I'm on an island
Something.
with a few games myself, man, and we'll
Yeah.
probably get into it. Hey,
Oh yeah.
side mention though, I forgot to say about 360. Alan Wake. Let's get some Alan Wake in there.
Duh. Yeah. I
Let's get some
just
Alan
got a
Wake.
just got a remaster. I believe they're working on a sequel at the moment.
Yep,
Yep.
and Control, same developer, awesome game.
Yeah.
So
Very weird game.
yeah,
That was
yeah. I feel
that
like
was
it needed
very weird.
more room to cook. To be honest, I feel like maybe budget or time constraints, they didn't really get to go as wild as they wanted to, but I like what they set up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Let's
All
move on
right.
to eighth
That
generation.
Yes, our last generation.
Yes.
This is the end. So just so everyone knows, when we set this up, I used the definition of console generations from Wikipedia. I say that because there is a huge bone of contention among gamers about where the Wii U and the Switch fall.
Mm.
Some people say the Wii U belongs back with the seventh generation. Some people say the Switch belongs in its own little thing, like a half step. Wikipedia says PS4, Xbone, Switch, and Wii U are all the eighth generation. So we're going with that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I
Extra
don't think,
console. Let's go.
yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it either. If you think there's something wrong with it, you're just, and I'm speaking to you, the listeners. If you have a problem with it, reconcile with it now because it's what we're carrying forward for the rest of this show's lifespan.
Make your peace with God, console players. We
Yes.
are discussing the Switch.
Yes. So, with that, we got
Yes.
four consoles here. The only one that I have zero experience with is the Wii U.
Okay.
Uh, from what I have read, the Fatal Frame game on there, what is it, Maiden of the Blackwater?
Yeah, which is, if it hasn't
Yeah,
already, I feel like it's been ported, right?
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like what, 3 games left on there that
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 haven't been
haven't been
ported.
ported.
Yeah.
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 So I would talk more in depth about it. I just don't have any experience with it, but from everything that I've read and heard, it is an excellent game. It is one of the preeminent horror games on the console.
Hmm. I
Do
would
you have any
agree. And the
experience?
Wii U is another ill-fated console that again was even more poorly managed than the GameCube, if you could fucking imagine that. But there is a game that got ported from the Wii U that I still think is better on the Wii U, and that's
Okay.
Zombie U. Zombie U was like a survival horror game during a zombie apocalypse where the Wii, what do they call the Wii U? The Wii U pad or whatever the fuck it's called, the gamepad
Yeah.
is where like your inventory management and stuff would be. So it's kind of like laying down your pack and getting into it. And there was a lot of like integrated gameplay between the gamepad and the game itself. And you could hold it up to like help you view like different like view modes. And it would work. Like the gamepad would sense like you're holding it up and like give you a different screen alternate to your TV screen so you could see different things. It was really gimmicky in a good way. Like they implemented the system's uniqueness, I think, to great effect in that game. So if you ever get the chance to get your hands on a Wii U and you're wondering why, Zombie U might be one of the reasons just for that unique experience.
All right. Um, so with that, let's knock off the other Nintendo console.
Okay.
Um, so the game that I picked for the Switch is available on multiple systems. I'm picking it exclusively for the Switch, not because I think the Switch version is better or anything. I'm picking it because are games on the other consoles that I want to highlight. So this is my way of getting this game into the discussion, and that game is Darkest Dungeon.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Darkest Dungeon, if you haven't played it, is it's an RPG of sorts. You assemble a party, uh, and there's what 20 character classes. It takes place in what seemingly maybe the late 1800s. There's definitely a pseudo Victorian Gothic / steampunk vibe to it.
Yeah, it's definitely very
Um,
Lovecraftian inspired for sure. That's a
oh yeah,
favorite time era, obviously, of those that lore. So
yes. Um, so yeah, very Lovecraftian. A lot of the character variety is absolutely huge. Everything from musketeer to a plague doctor to an adventurer to I can't even think of them all at the moment. There's just way too many, but they all have this dark and weird twist. And the whole idea is that you have inherited this mansion, and the entire land around it is corrupted. All the town near it is corrupted, and you are assembling. You don't even play as you. Like you are disembodied. You are just hiring this group of adventurers that you control, and sending them out to try and cleanse the land, and then at the same time get into the castle, plumb its dungeons, and free it from the curse that is affecting the world. Aside from the many and sundry eldritch horrors that abound in the sewers and the fields and the dungeon itself, there is a stress meter, which sounds very similar to the sanity meter from Eternal Darkness. But the gameplay of the stress meter is a little bit different in that each person has their own individual stress meter, and what stresses them out and the effects of the stress are all different. Someone can get stressed and become a pacifist. Someone could get stressed and become incredibly aggressive to the point where they're attacking their own party members. They could become cowardly. They could become uh, psychotic and run away. There are dozens of different uh, effects that can be had if you don't manage the stress properly, and the stress can go up by participating in fights, by triggering traps, by your torches going out. Um, there's so many things to manage as you're playing the game, and I still haven't beaten it. I've had the game now. I can't even tell you how many years since like the year it came out. I still haven't beaten it. It is. I will say it is relentlessly difficult,
yes.
but it is fun. Absolutely addictive.
Yeah, and its roguelike structure allows you to go in, get absolutely bodied, but still want to keep playing because you can. You could just keep, one more run, make
Yep.
adjustments, make tweaks. learn the game as it bashes you down and understand what to anticipate, what to tune for. And yeah, no, I agree. It's super hard, but also super fun. And if if you're a Dark Souls player, if you like RPGs that are extremely like difficult, like Shin Megami, something like that, I think it's a good marriage of those two.
All right, what's your pick for the Switch?
The Switch is a port machine. I was trying to think of like something that is only on the Switch, and I couldn't, unfortunately. There's a lot of really cool indie games and stuff that's kind of lower, I guess, not lower budget, but like lower scale, like Darkest Dungeons that you can play on there for sure. Like you are not going to be hurting for horror games on the Switch. I picked a personal favorite that I played recently from what's the name of the I'm blanking on the name of the publisher. They make those crazy E3 press releases. uh Digital Devolver
Did
Digital. Thank you. My goodness. My old man brain. Devolver Digital made a game called well, they didn't make it, they produced a game called Carrion. Have you played that?
I have it. I have not yet played it.
It's cool. I mean, it's you going side scrolling through like a Metroidvania style thing. Again, think like sci-fi aliens and stuff, but you're this mass of teeth and flesh, and you're like eating people to heal yourself and survive and grow, and you get stronger and bigger and can attack more people. But obviously, in the beginning and in certain parts of the game, you're very vulnerable. So if you are alerting the humans before you attack them, they can shoot you down, but you can very gruesomely, move through. I like games sometimes that make you the villain or make you the monster. Like I really enjoyed playing Jaws back on the PS2, even though it was kind of terrible, just because of the aesthetic and you don't get to do it very much. So if you want to get a little demented and you just want to tear shit up, you could probably do a lot worse than Carrion. So
It's been sitting in my backlog on the Switch for a while. I've been playing God, what is it? Circus Electrique.
mm,
Which is like it's got Darkest Dungeon elements to it, but it's more circusy and steampunky. I
okay.
shouldn't have said steampunk earlier, but this is definitely for Darkest Dungeon because that's not. This is very steampunk.
Mm,
Um, but I've been bashing my head against the wall with that because it's a little tricky. But I like I said, Carry On's been sitting there just going, play me, try me out, start me.
yeah.
You've had me for 2 years.
Another short game too. Like if you have a free weekend, you could probably blast through it, and you may not even finish it because I got pretty close, but I reached the saturation point where I was like, yeah, gameplay is cool, but I'm done. I mean, there are again a lot of short indie games. Inmost, I think, recently came out. There's Paratopic. Like, there's a lot of fun short games that you can play in a weekend on the Wii, and this is the month to do it. So definitely
Yep.
don't sleep on those sales. Don't sleep on those small horror games. You may find that you actually enjoy them a lot more than you think you would.
Yep. All right, moving on to the X Bone. And I should have said this 3 generations ago. I've never played a single Xbox,
Hmm.
so I'm flying blind with a lot of them.
That's okay. I got you covered.
This one I did have a game to nominate. More, it is another cross-platform game, but I think it deserves mentioning, even though it's a fairly obvious one, and that's Dead by Daylight.
Okay. Yeah.
Multiplayer asymmetrical horror game where you either play as the killer or as one of the people trying to not be killed.
Hmm.
Um, I will say it's a lot more polished than most of Gun Media's asymmetrical horror multiplayer games. I only say that because I was a fan of the Friday the 13th game, and that game's a little rough
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
And it will always be because it's getting delisted.
And you could pretty much
But
get that fixed from Death by Daylight. That's the cool thing about that series is the fact that like they have so many different themes that cover all the
yes,
horror genres, all the monster movies you can think of, all the horror games you can think of. Like they're really good. They're like the um what's that game called that all the kids play? The shooter game. Uh with the colors and they build up stuff.
oh, Fortnite.
Thank you. They're like the Fortnite of horror games. He just
They really
partner with
are.
everybody.
Yeah, they really are. Like, there's got to be 30, 40 different character packs, whether it's
Easy.
original
Yeah.
or it's, Scream, Hellraiser, Halloween,
Silent
Elm
Hill,
Street, Silent
Resident Evil,
Hill.
all that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any skin that you want, you got. And all you need is, you can partner with friends, you can play with strangers, but it's kill or run away. The game's been around for damn near a decade now, I think, or at
Yeah.
least it feels like it.
Yeah, it's
But
a good
it's
time. There's always people playing.
yeah, it's survived this long and that much DLC for a reason.
100%. Well, I didn't pick one for Xbone. Xbone is the Xbox One is literally my least favorite of the Xbox consoles, followed by the original Xbox. I think the 360 and then the current series are probably the best that they've ever done. And I think it's just because the Xbox One didn't really stand out. I mean, I got one on the cheap because I just was like, well, maybe they'll come out with something I want to play. They never did. Sunset Overdrive, I think, was the closest they got, and while that I don't think that has been technically ported, you can play any Xbox One game you want on a Series S or X, and the Series X is great, so there's just really no reason to even mess with it nowadays. So I'm going to skip past that and do my PS4. The PS4 horror game I chose is themed similarly to Ju-On, The Grudge, where you kind of have people you can hang out with and play and have fun with it. And that's Until Dawn. Super massive.
We did it
We
again.
did it again.
We
Yeah,
did it
boy.
again.
Supermassive makes these really awesome, like, how would you describe them? Because they're not point and click. They're not like Walking Dead or like Telltale games. But they kind of are. You're just playing through a horror game and getting scared and making decisions. And obviously, the overarching gameplay hook is to see if you can get to the end of whatever nightmare they're presenting you with everybody alive, which I have done
There
in Until Dawn, but I haven't done in their other games. I've played through their other games like once and was like, I'm satisfied with who got killed and who didn't. But Until Dawn, like their first one of this type that they've done, in my opinion, so far. And I've played The Quarry, I've played, the Dark Pictures anthology games. They did the best with Until Dawn, I think, because they were able to fit multiple genres of horror into one game, but still have a cohesive story because of all the red herrings. Like, are you fighting ghosts? Are you fighting psycho killers? Are you fighting like some kind of mass murderer or a monster? Like what is happening on this mountain that's threatening these kids? And the cheesy dialogue, the characters, like it just feels like you're watching an old 80s horror movie, and they do a really good job, I think the best, in endearing you to characters that kind of suck. Like there's some characters in this game that I absolutely hate to love and love to hate. You know what I mean?
hmm Oh, I can remember there is a scene where three or four people have escaped and they're in a basement, and there's one character and she is just the worst. She is just a pain in the ass,
Yeah.
and
Love her.
and and she's caustic and she's uncaring about everyone.
Yep.
And you have a choice where you can you can keep her alive, or you could shoot her in the head.
Because she might
And
be a threat. There's a chance.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember I got to that point. I'm like, oh man, I really want this bitch dead.
Oh
Oh
no.
god, I really want to shoot her. I can't take another minute of her fucking mouth. But I want to try and save everyone.
Yeah.
And that's it's a choose your own adventure, like, but not in the choose your own adventure way like you were saying, like the Telltale games. It's more because you do have some control. You do have character movement. There are items that you can pick up. There are things that you can overlook, and that they are choices that can cause things to go in another direction.
Yeah, there's a very
And
butterfly effect theme running through these games where even in a conversation, the way that you treat another person could mean life and death later on if they don't trust you fast enough in a heart-wrenching, like in a fast-paced moment, right? Like
yeah,
they could open the
absolutely.
door to let you in, but they might not because they hesitate because you're a bit of a dick, right? Like
Yep.
so
Yep. And like you were saying, the genre mixes. So if you're a horror movie fan, I mean, there's elements of Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
There's elements of a camp slasher,
Hmm.
like a Friday the 13th,
Yep.
or the millions of other ones. There's elements of The Descent.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to give any of the twists away, but there's, oh god,
And
there's kind of an element of Scream to it.
yeah.
Um,
And Rami Malek puts forth an awesome performance in this game. The
yeah,
guy from Mr.
absolutely.
Roboto, like
Yep.
he is great in this game. Uh,
Um,
some of my
yeah,
favorite moments were with him in it, to be honest. Like he's the appropriate amount of corny, crazy, and weird. I loved it. I loved it so much.
and that's another thing too. The corniness of it. It's not corny in a bad way, like a sci-fi original where it's leaning into it, but trying to be self-aware about it. It's corny because it is referencing something that was corny. It's
Yeah.
referencing those 80s horror
It's
movies.
very intentional.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can
Yes.
tell. The writing is good enough that you can tell.
Right. Like Hayden Panettiere spends 90% of the game in a towel and nothing else. There is no reason for Hayden Panettiere to be in a towel and nothing else except just because it's a horror movie and you've got to have a hot babe wearing little to nothing.
Yeah, or there are two
No.
characters that are so horny for each other, and there's a entire section where like you're trying to like set the mood, and
Yep.
depending on how well you set the mood, the scene could end with the characters barely clothed or fully clothed. It just depends on like how you do it. So that's like a little mini goal within a goal, just to kind of get that exploitation aspect to it. You know what I mean? The sex that goes along with a lot of classic horror, right?
Yep.
And again, they hit all these tropes so cohesively. Like I'm so impressed with how they were able to ping pong all these different horror genres, but make it a unit. You know what I mean? It feels
Mm-hmm.
organic.
And,
It's a masterpiece.
and it never, when it hits the tropes, when it hits those cliche moments that we all know are coming,
Hmm.
it does so in a way where the cliche fulfilling the cliche feels justified.
Yeah.
It's organic. It's natural that this is going to be the progression, but also at the same time, there's no wink and a nudge. It's not like, hey, look, it's the babe in the bikini.
Yeah. Nobody's mugging
It's
for
the
the
fucking
camera in this game.
yeah. It's only meta in the sense that if you are a horror fan, you will have an extra level of appreciation for this game,
Yeah.
but it is never winking at you.
I had an entire room full of people from my like some friends and then some people that I used to work with come over to play the game, and we got halfway through, and every single one of those people came back the following weekend to finish the game because they were that invested, and they did shoot the girl. Because I was letting them make the decisions there, and they were like, "You should shoot her," and I was like, "Okay," and then they were like, "Oh, damn it, we shouldn't have done that." It was fun to like see them mess up and kind of bumble through it while I was driving. You know what I mean? Like it's very fun to play with the crowd if you have the opportunity, for sure.
Yeah, and because of the butterfly effect mechanic, you can go back to those butterfly moments and pick the other option.
Mm,
Try to find the that missing page of the diary, or whatever it may be, and see what the other path is. You can There's almost an aspect of Undertale to it where, like, do you want everyone to live? Do you want a complete and utter massacre and everyone dies?
yeah,
You kind of you can live out whichever version of it you want.
that's true.
Yeah. I tried to save everyone on my first pass, missed one.
Let me guess. It was the boyfriend of the girl you don't like because you tried to have him save her twice when she was in danger instead of just once.
No.
Oh, because that's
It
what
was
happened to
it
me.
was it was in the last scene when
When you
you
can't move
got
the controller, that's hard. That part's so hard.
yeah, I got Hayden Panettiere killed in the last scene.
Ah,
I'm sitting there like, I'm going to hold this steady. I'm going to hold it on my lap. My hands are going to be resting on my legs so that way the controller isn't moving. This is the perfect thing. And somehow my hands dipped a little bit, just enough for it to register the motion. Got her killed. I'm like, son of a.
Yeah,
bitch.
I cheated because those don't move moments got increasingly harder, and I was like, I'm not risking it. I had turned off the vibration by then. I just set it on a table. I was like, nope, here you go.
I should have done that. I don't know why I didn't think of that. I
Yeah,
should have done that.
immediately on a table. I was like, nope, not today. But no, I tried to like manually do that with the crowd because they definitely wanted her to live, and I failed. I just got her killed because you have to hold it so still.
Hmm.
It's rough. It can be rough, but it's fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, folks. Spooky season is here, and we have given you a lot to chew through. So I hope that someone out there is at least inspired to try something new and maybe find something that they may end up really loving. And if y'all have anything that you want to suggest to us, we are definitely open, and we will give you ways to contact us in the close.
Yes. So, first of all, thank you for listening. Please like this, rate and review it on the podcast platform of your choice. Recommend it to friends. You got gamer friends, put it in front of them, especially ones that love gaming history, because that's what this whole thing is about, celebrating the good and the bad of history rather than keeping it local. So please get it out there. As for how to reach us, there's a multitude of ways. You can email us at firstgengamers1000, that's one and three zeros, at gmail.com. That is the show's official email box. If you want to contact us individually and directly, you can contact me. I am on Blue Sky. I am not on Twitter because it's Twitter.
Yeah.
You but I am on Blue Sky at Streets of Jed. I'm on Discord. Jed Shaffer, I believe, is the screen name. I'm still learning how to use Discord.
Yeah, you have to have patience with us,
Yeah.
folks. We are first generation gamers, so we are
Yes,
older.
we grew up with technology, with a lot of this technology as it evolved, but at a certain point, it is evolving faster than we are.
Yeah, I hate to
Um,
admit it, but there's a breaking point where you just stopped adapting new things. You're like, I'm good.
Yeah, where you go, I can't really find a place for that in my life. I'll just let that fall
Oh
down.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, also Letterboxd, I'm on there if you want to read. My movie reviews, every movie I watch, I review. I'm on there as Jed Schaefer. That's Shaffer. Especially with this being October, it's going to be just about all scary movies. So, I just watched Mandy last night. So if you'd like to see me tear that movie a new asshole, follow me on there.
Okay. And I think we're going to put together a link tree so we can try to get as many links as we can conveniently to you guys in the description of the episode and, of course, our podcast page. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to try to do a TikTok as well and get that set up. And we both, as we alluded to earlier, have done other podcast shows. So if you like us and like what we do and want to check out our older stuff, you're more than welcome. And we'll have links to that as well. I'm mainly hang out on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck it's called nowadays. Mostly just to like get game sales, find out when I can pre-order amiibos, follow some gaming journalists that I like. But I do notice when I receive messages on there and my DMs are open. So if you ever want to reach out to me, Twitter is probably the best place to do it at Mike Peterson AL. And again, we'll have those links. We'll have those links ready for you. No worries.
Yep. It's a work in progress.
Yes, it is. First episode and all
Yep.
that.
Yes. All right. So thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope to catch you next time. Our next episode will be on the most important game from every generation, except the first one. We're never going back to the first generation because it's Pong. Every fucking game is Pong with a damn plastic sheet over it. There's nothing to say.
That's 100% true. So if you want a little tidbit or a taste of the upcoming episode, Pong.
Yeah,
Pong.
Pong.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll move on from there.
Yeah. So join us next time. The most important game of every generation. I guarantee you, one of us is probably both of us is going to say something that is going to make you slap your forehead and go, "Why am I listening to these jackasses?" But
Yeah.
trust me, we will defend it somehow.
Yeah. No, you'll definitely be wrong when you feel that way because we're 100% right all the time. But feel free to rage about it in the comments or send us messages. I'm sure we'll read them.
Yep. All right. Until next time.